Holy Bible. I'll read from the passage or the verse from Psalms number 127, just verse 1. Unless the Lord builds a house, the work of the builders is wasted. Unless the Lord protects a city, guarding it with sentries will do no good. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come before you with open hearts, calm our minds, and quiet our spirits, so we may focus fully on the task ahead of us. Grant us your peace, grant us the wisdom and inspiration to plan and execute this event with excellence. We commit this report into your hands and task your blessing over it. May today be a memory that burns bright within the Zimbabwean iron and steel industry for generations to come. Lord, we ask for your blessing on our decision-making processes today. Like Jabez, we pray for your hand to guide us and your wisdom to direct our paths. Help us discern the right course of action in all matters before us. May our choices align with your will and benefit all stakeholders. Holy Spirit, we invite your presence into our meeting today. Guard our minds and hearts as we discuss important matters of our industry. Grant us your peace that surpasses all understanding, keeping us focused and productive. Guide our conversations and inspire creative solutions. In your name we pray. Amen.
The Minister of Industry and Commerce, Honorable N.M. Lovu, ably represented by the Permanent Secretary, Dr. T.W. Wushe. Permanent Secretaries here present, senior government officials, Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, senior government officials, President of the EISAZ, the Engineering, Iron and Steel Association of Zimbabwe, Mrs. C. Chigombe, Chairman of NEC for Engineering, Iron and Steel Sector, Advocate C.F. Dube, EISAZ board members, NEC Iron and Steel Industry board members, Chief Executive Officer for EISAZ, Mr. M. Ruziwa, Chief Executive Officer for NEC Engineering, Iron and Steel, Mr. T.C. Nyamatore, CEOs of business membership organizations, CZI Chief Executive Officer, Sekai Kuarika, Captains of Industry and Commerce, distinguished guests, members of the media fraternity, ladies and gentlemen. A big welcome it is to you to the 2025 Engineering, Iron and Steel Industry Report launch. I'm Ibn Mamunda and I'm elated to be your Master of Ceremonies this very day. The launch of this report, of course, comes at a pivotal time in the history of this very sector in Zimbabwe, where it is that there are so many moving pieces, not just within Zimbabwe, but even beyond, of course, Zimbabwean borders. Of notice is the fact that historically, this sector used to employ over 55,000 employees across Zimbabwe. But now what we're seeing is that it is simply a shadow of what it was in the past. So the big question that we are asking today is, how can Zimbabwe regain its lost glory? Of course, you've got activity, you've got the Dinson Iron and Steel, which is promising to solve some of the issues that we've got in the country, and several other players here represented. At the same time, you look at South Africa, which has for the longest sustained this very region. You'd find there are some seismic shifts that are taking place. You look at Murray and Roberts, which gave birth to Masimba and of course Pro Plastics here in Zimbabwe. It's currently undergoing liquidation in South Africa. You also look at ArcelorMittal, which according to a report is expected to cut up to 4,000 jobs perhaps in 2026 and beyond. The big question is, Could that be a pivotal moment for Zimbabwe? Could that be a pivotal moment for this sector here, and perhaps seize the opportunity to, of course, be that iron and steel hub for Southern Africa? Now at this point, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to call upon Mr. M. Rosiwa, the EISAZ Chief Executive Officer. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause.
Thank you, Event Director. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Engineering, Iron and Steel Association of Zimbabwe and the National Employment Council for the Engineering, Iron and Steel sector, I warmly welcome you to this defining occasion. Today's launch of the State of Industry Report 2025 brings together government, business, labor, academia and development partners, a community united by a common mission. Ladies and gentlemen, the strength of a nation is written in the bridges it builds, the machines it powers, and the industries it sustains. This is why we are here to affirm that the engineering, iron and steel sector is not just an industry, but the very framework upon which Zimbabwe's future will stand. Event Director, at this juncture, allow me to recognize our guest of honor, the Minister of Industry and Commerce, Honorable Ngovisita Mangaliso Ndlovu, ably represented by our esteemed Permanent Secretary, Dr. Thomas Utete Ushe. I'm going to write on the protocols that have already been observed. Event Director, our guest of honor said, nations do not rise on dreams alone. They rise on the strength of the industries that give those dreams a structure. For Zimbabwe, that structure rests on the engineering, iron and steel sector. This sector, I would say, is more than an industry. It is the silent architect of progress, shaping our bridges, powering our factories, equipping our mines, and sustaining our farms. It is engineering that designs, iron that endures, and steel that strengthens, together forming the backbone of our modern economy. Without it, progress becomes fragile. With it, we gain the power to build, to innovate, and to compete on the regional and the global stage. Today, as we launch the State of the Engineering, Iron and Steel Report, we declare a renewal that Zimbabwe's future will be built here by our own people, with our own skills, and upon the strength of this sector. We say engineering, iron and steel are the language of modern nations, spoken not in words, but in roads, in machines, in factories, and prosperity. This gathering, honorable guest of honor, is not about unveiling a document. It is about reaffirming collective commitment to the future of one of Zimbabwe's most strategic sectors. The engineering, iron and steel industry is the anchor of every value chain. It provides the steel in our bridges, the machinery in our mines, and the tools in our agriculture. It is the sector that makes industrialization possible. Without it, our aspirations for modernization, for competitiveness and inclusive growth would remain distant. With it, Zimbabwe has the means to rebuild, to reindustrialize, and to prosper in line with the regional opportunities and global trends. The report, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, is the outcome of broad consultations and rigorous analysis undertaken in partnership with the National Employment Council for Engineering, Iron and Steel Industry. This collaboration demonstrates what is possible when industry and labor come together, supported by government and other stakeholders. This report is a mirror of where we are and a compass to guide where we must go. And above all, the program before us has been carefully designed to ensure that today is an active engagement rather than a passive ceremony. We begin with leadership reflections from both EISAZ and NEC leadership, grounding our dialogue in the realities of the industry and labor. We then move to technical presentation of the report, which will provide insights into the current state of the sector. This will be followed by a distinguished panel discussion where industry leaders, academics and practitioners will interrogate the issues with foresight and honesty. Finally, we will hear from our guest of honor, whose keynote will situate this report within the broader framework of national industrial policy. Ladies and gentlemen, they say meetings end with applause, but progress begins with commitments. Allow me to express our sincere gratitude to all who made this day possible. Our research team, led by Engineer Lloyd Nyemba, for their diligence and insight. Our industry members, both large and small, whose lived experiences gave depth to this process. Our colleagues at the National Employment Council for their enduring partnership and commitment to industrial harmony. And above all, the Ministry of Industry and Commerce for its consistent support and recognition for this sector as central to Zimbabwe's economic transformation. Colleagues, the history of great nations is written not only in policy, but in engineering, iron and steel, in resilience, innovation, and vision. As we begin today's program, let us ask ourselves what will be said of our generation. Did we watch the decline of this sector, or did we lead its renewal? On behalf of EISAZ and NEC for engineering, iron and steel sector, I urge each of us to listen, to share, to commit, and above all to act. The future is not given. It is built piece by piece, decision by decision, and partnership by partnership. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I warmly welcome you to this momentous occasion. May this launch be remembered not just for speeches, but for the resolve it sparks, the partnerships it strengthens, and the bold steps it inspires. Together, let us prove that Nyika inova kwaneve nevayo. A nation is built by its own citizens. This is not just a mantra, but a living reality for our sector and for our nation at large. Event Director, I thank you and over to you.
Our guest of honor, the Minister of Industry and Commerce, Honorable N.M. Ndlovu, ably represented by the Permanent Secretary, Dr. T. Ushe. Permanent Secretary is here present. Deputy Governor, Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Dr. Innocent Mache. All senior government officials, Chairman of NEC Engineering, Iron and Steel Sector, Advocate C.F. Due. EISAZ National Executive Council members here present, NEC Engineering, Iron and Steel Sector board members, CEO of EISAZ, Mr. Mbruziwa, CEO of NEC Engineering, Iron and Steel, Mr. Tisi Nyamatore, CEOs of business membership organizations, Captain of Industry and Commerce, distinguished guests, members of the media fraternity, ladies and gentlemen. It is with pride and deep appreciation that I welcome you all to the historical occasion, the launch of the State of the Industry, Iron and Steel Industry Report 2025. As President of the Engineering, Iron and Steel Association of Zimbabwe, EISAZ, Allow me to reaffirm that our association stands as the unifying platform, that the authoritative voice of this sector. Our mandate is clear: to represent and safeguard the interests of our industry, to advocate for policies and drive competitiveness and growth, to provide research, intelligence, and solutions that guide decision-making, to serve a partner to government, labor, and other stakeholders in building a resilient economy. EISAZ is not just an association, it is the voice of the engineering, iron and steel sector, speaking for the factories, the foundries, and the innovators who build our nation every day. We deeply appreciate the support of government through the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, whose guidance and partnership continue to place this sector at the center of Zimbabwe's national development agenda. The Permanent Secretary present here today is not just ceremonial, it is a statement of commitment. We also salute the contributions of the industry leaders, large, medium, and small enterprises, both established and emerging, whose persistence and investment keep this sector alive in difficult conditions. To labor, academias, financiers, and development partners present, your partnership is indispensable. Most importantly, let me highlight the strategic collaboration between EISAZ and the National Employment Council for Engineering, Iron and Steel Industry. Together we have gone beyond traditional roles to jointly produce this report, showing that social dialogue is not about confrontation, but about co-creation. Partnership built on trust and evidence are the true engine of progress. When industry and labor work together, supported by government, the result is sustainable transformation. The report we launch today is not an academic thesis, it is working too. It is a mirror that reflects where we are as a sector, a compass that points to where we must go, and platform for dialogue and action. It captures not only the data, but also the lived realities of our members. It is rigorous, it is inclusive, and it is timely. I will not preempt the detailed presentation by Engineer Nyemba, but I will stress this. Yes, the challenges are real, but so the opportunities. And what matters is how we respond to the opportunities before us. If we act with unity, with clarity, and with courage, this sector can once again be the powerhouse of Zimbabwe's economy. Great nations are not remembered for the problems they have faced, but for the industry they built in the future they forged. On behalf, this launch is not just a report, it is about a renewal of commitment. On behalf of EISAZ, I pledge that we will continue to advocate boldly for our members, coordinate and amplify the voice of this sector, strengthens partnership across government, labor and industry, and ensure that the sector's contribution to the Vision 2030 is not in doubt, but it's in evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, the history of strong nation is written in steel, and the resilience of their workers, the boldness of their leaders, and the innovation of their industries, Zimbabwe has all these ingredients. What is required now is the will to act together decisively and agently. Let this report be remembered as the turning point, the moment we said decline ends here and renewal begins now. I thank you.
Right, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we will receive remarks from the NEC Chairman, Now, of course, NEC Engineering, Iron and Steel Industry Board Chairman, Advocate C.F. Dube.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Let me recognize the Minister of Industry and Commerce, Honorable N.M. Ndlovu, represented by the Permanent Secretary, Dr. T.U. Ushe. Let me also recognize other permanent secretaries in the audience. Allow me also to recognize the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Dr. Innocent Mashi. And let me recognize the President of EISAZ, Mrs. C. Chigombe, and her board members. Let me also recognize my own board members for the NEC, Engineering, Iron and Steel. And at this juncture, and in the interest of time, allow me to sit on the protocol already observed. I am honored, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome you to this state of our industry engagement and to present remarks aligned to the program and the engineering report which is before us. Ladies and gentlemen, today's gathering is set for clear purposes, set to take stock of our industry and to do so with honesty, to plan with precision, and to move forward with unity. The program is designed to provoke practical thinking, and the report captures data-driven views on what characterize our industries. Our task is not simply to admire the analysis presented in the report, but to translate the analysis into evidence-based execution. As a legally constituted bipartite council, ladies and gentlemen, our NEC unifies employers in the sector with workers and also with government and other stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, we are a bipartite arrangement which works with clear focus to identify problems, with clear focus to usher in time-sensitive solutions to the problems which we identify. Why is our sector important? Let me add my voice to previous speakers and what they have said. Engineering, iron and steel is not just another sector of subsectors. It is the economy's backbone. It frames our factories and homes. It carries our power and water. It builds our roads and rails. It equips our farms and mines. And last but not least, it gives our manufacturers the tools to compete. When engineering thrives, ladies and gentlemen, productivity rises across the economy. When steel is competitive, infrastructure becomes affordable, exports become possible, and jobs become sustainable. This is why our sector, ladies and gentlemen, is crucial and central to the attainment of Vision 2030. A modern, inclusive, upper middle income economy requires an engineering base that is reliable, safe, competitive, and innovative. It requires still value chains that capture more value at home, transforming raw materials into finished goods for domestic use and for regional markets under the African Continental Trade Area. What is the state of play in our sector? The report which is before you reflects encouraging green shoots, but dare I say alongside stubborn bottlenecks. And what are these bottlenecks? Need I remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that confronting us is capacity, challenges in certain value chains. There are new investments and plant upgrades which are taking place. And demand for fabricated products, ladies and gentlemen, is recovering in infrastructure, agriculture, and mining. Standards adoption is improving. At the same time, we have the headwinds, and which feature in the following: inconsistent power logistics and associated costs. Permanent Secretary, we have skills gaps in advanced manufacturing. We have working capital constraints, fragmented local supply chains, and growing pockets of informality that undermine safety, quality, and fair competition. We must, ladies and gentlemen, treat these realities as not excuses, but as things which sit crucially and centrally on our individual to-do lists. Every constraint, ladies and gentlemen, is to be seen as a solvable design problem. Every shortfall, ladies and gentlemen, is to be considered a signal to organize better. Invest smarter, and not least execute better. What is it that we ask of you, Permanent Secretary, representing the Honorable Minister? We table allowance to three priorities. The first is the power and tariffs challenges. We urge and urge urgently, Honorable Secretary, that government prioritizes power supply and move toward progressive and post-reflective frameworks compiled with efficiency interventions for industrial users who invest in energy management and storage. Secondly, we prioritize rail revival and corridor logistics. In this regard, ladies and gentlemen, we need to prioritize steel and engineering inputs and exports within rail rehabilitation and key trade corridors to reduce costs and turnaround times. The next set of priorities focus on smart incentives. In this regard, the Minister Secretary, hear me speak out. We urge government to use integrated, time-bound incentives for plant retooling, standards certification, and export development, rewarding productivity and not ushering in protection. The last priority we table, ladies and gentlemen, is one to do with regulatory streamlining. Recently, there has been talk and indeed action to rebase our regulatory challenges. And I use this opportunity to urge government through you, Permanent Secretary, to digitize permits and inspections, consolidate overlapping requirements, and strengthen standards enforcement so that compliant firms are not undercut by informality. Ladies and gentlemen, on our part, we pledge to meet government halfway by investing in people, technology and compliance, and by keeping workplaces stable, safe, and productive. And to our partners, hear me speak as I hereby do, to EISAZ and our firms, please compete on quality and delivery. Share demand focus so that suppliers can plan. Invest in maintenance culture and digital tools. Build a reputation that opens doors across Africa. To our labor and worker representatives in this audience, please continue to champion safety, skills development, and enhanced productivity. Please bring forward ideas from the shop floor. It is, ladies and gentlemen, said, it has been said loudest over time, that often the best innovations come from the people who run the machines. To our financiers and development partners in the audience, please I urge you to back the real economy with instruments that fit industrial reality. I urge you to support retooling, skills development, and standards improvement, as these are bankable product enablers. Let me say that my other speakers have said something about the report and the program before me. The program which is before you brings together voices we need around one table. Voices from policymakers represented here by you, PEMSEC, representing government. Represented here also by industry leadership, specifically representing labor, representing finance, standards development and setting, and refinement of skill sets. The panels we are going to be witnessing, participating later in the programs, are not for speeches. They are, ladies and gentlemen, to clarify and craft time-bound solutions to all problems besetting the sector. Let us use the time availed to identify task owners, set timelines, and agree on performance indicators. To Engineer Lloyd Nyemba and the teams which contributed to the creation and crafting of the report, let me join previous speakers in thanking you for this wonderful piece, a record of what we must see with our open lenses and decide faithfully on the journey forward. I would also want to speak about the national aspiration and the sector mission. Colleagues and Permanent Secretary, Vision 2030 calls on all of us to build a modern, inclusive economy that leaves no province behind, no person behind. Our industry can make that clarion call real through dignified jobs and a specific focus on local content creation, safer workplaces, export earnings included in the list, and last but not least, infrastructure, which is creating infrastructure which is relevant to the needs of our sector. Let us be remembered, ladies and gentlemen, as the P2P generation that does the following: turning potential to plans, converting plans into products, and transforming partnerships into real performance. Let us be the generation that is known to have restored pride in the Made in Zimbabwe mantra, converting it from being a slogan to a fundamental standard that endures all time. let me speak to you as individuals participating in this discussion. I want to suggest that when you leave this room, please take with you 3 commitments. The first commitment is a personal commitment. Ask yourself, what will you do and do differently, effectively from today? The second commitment is a partnership commitment. Leaving this room, who will you work with to deliver outcomes at correct levels of speed and scale? The performance commitment is the last. What metric, back in your work situation, will you improve? By how much and by when? If we each act on these 3 commitments, then the next State of Industry report can register an improvement from the one before you. To get closer, in terms of action items on the real problems which beset our sector, and continue to register the turnaround journey which takes our sector back to its glory days. It can be done. It should be done. There are no excuses for going back in the meeting. Permanent Secretary, distinguished guests, colleagues, let me thank you for your time. Let me thank you for your leadership. Let me thank you for your partnership. The engineering, iron and steel community stands ready to play its part in rebuilding a resilient, competitive and prosperous Zimbabwe. I now invite you to engage fully with the program as your guide and to treat every session as a working session. The future is built by those who show up, learn and deliver. I thank you.
Round of applause for the NEC Engineering, Iron and Steel Industry Board Chairman, who's also the chair of the EMF Medical Aid Society. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Engineer L.E.N. Nyemba for the presentation of the Engineering, Iron and Steel Industry Report 2025.
May I recognize the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, who represents the Minister. I should also recognize the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, all government ministries and their officials, the industry representatives here present, also my principals from EISAZ and NEC and every guest here. You are duly honored. Thank you. I will start with the scope and coverage of the engineering and steel industry so that we can all see which are the departments or the subsectors that are presented. Then the SWOT analysis, then we go to the key performance metrics and the benchmarking, how are others faring, then the value chain map and the spatial layout, and the recommendations and the conclusions. So let me start on the scope and coverage of the engineering iron and steel sector, looking at what we covered. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have the automotive industry there as a major sector, and you can see the notable players and the notable products and the indicative values that is from the baseline. Then we have the electrical engineered goods and electronic goods. Then we do have primary steel production. Next slide, please. Then we have the foundry and associated engineering, equipment manufacturers and machined components, and fabricated metal and steel products. So we tried to cover almost every subsector that you may think of in our report, and we had to do some sampling. Then we come to the SWOT analysis. Indeed, there are notable challenges that the industry faces. Erratic power supply, which remains an issue with different players along the steel value chain, and most are load shed between 8 and 4, and this is actually the time when most of the businesses are active. So that one's a huge constraint, but on a brighter note, we have observed that those who are on the dedicated lines with ZETDC, there's a great improvement in availability of 70%, and the 30% unavailability of power there is attributable to distribution and transmission faults. So we are very confident that if the sector is prioritized as far as dedication of power is concerned, that would have a huge positive impact in addressing that constraint. The cost of electricity is also quite high. We are talking of a range of 14 to 23 cents. US dollars, 23 cents per kilowatt hour. And these energy intensive users in the steel industry, they are struggling with some resorting to only working on night shift and abandoning the day. So what it means is already capacity utilization is constrained, because most of these operations, they are actually designed for 24/7 operation. And when you are restricting yourself to 8 over 24, that's a very huge capacity constraint. High cost of finance funding, the interest rates ranging between 15 and 25% with short tenures, and these are far higher than the regional average of 3 to 10%. And therefore, it becomes very difficult for these organizations to compete based on that. Most are then resorting to generating their own working capital, which in business terms is quite difficult to compete whilst you generate your working capital in that manner to operate. A huge concern as well as the unfair trade practices by regional competitors who breach bilateral, regional and global trade protocols. We have, for example, Zambia. They are putting a high tariff on exports, that is from Zimbabwe, of iron and steel products. And of course, right now there is a retaliation that has happened from Zimbabwe to ensure that there is a balance. But I'm sure that is not very healthy, and I think there should be smarter ways to ensure that that challenge of unfair trade practices is addressed. Else, the industry is threatened, especially with those products that are coming, the same products that are imports that are competing on our local market. Next slide. Then there's the 70% export earnings retention, which is actually making our iron and steel products 10 to 20% more expensive than competitors. And right now, the exports have actually dwindled from the sector. So that is an issue to be tackled at every level of the value chain. Then there's also failure to tap into opportunities presented by growth in the mining and infrastructure development industry. There's a lot of infrastructural development that is happening in Zimbabwe. The new gold, that is lithium, there's a lot of activities and investments around that. But as a sector, we feel that it hasn't yet translated into tangible opportunities that we could tap into due to various reasons. One of them being with China, where their domestic policy favors bringing wholly manufactured components from their host country at the expense of local supplies. That has to be revisited so that we tap into this opportunity to actually resuscitate the industry. The iron and steel industry is not revived by imagination, but is revived through the market opportunities that are created by those very same projects that are significant, because that's where the high impact is. And therefore, if there are no deliberations on such opportunities for the sector to tap into, then we have to forget about the revival of the industry. We have stiff competition from imports. Many companies have shut down due to low volumes on the market. The interesting thing is, it's not that the market is not there. The market is there because whenever you see a product that is not made in Zimbabwe, but different consumers enjoying it, the market is there, but we cannot compete. And so there are two issues there. We have, on one hand, we have the very competitive, high quality products coming from imports, and we can't compete. Then there's also an influx of cheap substandard products coming as well. And this is actually threatening to close most of the local manufacturing that is happening. So there's need to deliberate frankly on this very real threat. Most of these products come at very low cost and duty-free. And on the same time, the local market is relying on imports of raw materials from the same countries that we are competing with. And you see, in that way, there's no way we can compete with the imports when we are actually importing the raw materials from them. Steel is a heavy product, so the cost even associated with the logistics is quite high, and therefore it makes the situation complex. Then there's zero to low import tariffs on products that are produced locally, and many products that are produced locally enter the country at zero to low tariffs. So there's a threat, a genuine threat of existence that we face. Okay, next slide, please. Then we also have sector-specific challenges, like those who are in primary steel production. The classification of steel as a mineral and the associated challenges, misplacement, misalignments, they remain unresolved, and that has become quite a huge constraint. Scrap feedstock challenge is quite real for the foundry industry. The concern is it has been now a while, more than a decade, whilst we are in this situation. For the cast steels, at least it's better now because of disco and the pig iron that they produce has now become feedstock for the cast steels. But for the other steel products, then that scrap remains a challenge. How is the challenge defined? You have the scrap dealers currently saying the local industry cannot consume the volumes that we want to sell to them. And therefore, what we sell to the export market is actually in excess of what the local market requires. Then the local market is saying in terms of working capital, we are constrained to take all the huge volumes in advance. So these are some of the challenges that are on the ground, and I think the scrap value chain has to be re-looked. The reason being, when you look at the world over, and they talk about environmental sustainability and green steel, the direction is favoring a move towards electric arc furnace production and the use of scrap because it is less carbon intensive. Now what it means is scrap becomes it becomes the new gold in terms of value. So when we dispose of all our scrap, say cheaply to other countries, we are actually building capacity and competitiveness for the importers who are competing on the local market that we are all facing, and those who are really competing better than us. So we are shooting ourselves in the foot. Then the third challenge there on the sector specific is on primary steel production. We currently do not have the capacity to make the flat products in heavy sections. It's a huge loss in terms of opportunity because globally construction is the major consumer of iron and steel products, constituting 50% and over. But for the developing world, it's not even 50. We get to 60% because there's still a lot that has to be done in terms of infrastructural development. So when we are building this capacity in primary steel production and neglecting the flat and heavy sections, our impact is compromised. Then, those who evaluate us may say, but now you say you are producing steel, but why is it that still we have a huge import bill on steel, yet we are producing steel around? So we have to look deliberately at that capacity to make flat and heavy sections. The heavy sections are the ones that are used, your bridges, your storage buildings, the flat products, right now construction in terms of housing, etc., the galvanized sheets, the roofing sheets, and a lot of related stuff. So it is very important to build that capacity. Next slide, please. So when we look at the challenges there, we are saying without a deliberate and clear rescue plan, the engineering and steel sector of Zimbabwe will continue to deindustrialize until total collapse. The foundry industry right now is on the verge of collapse. We've seen many giants falling. So those constraints and challenges, we have to tackle them head on and turn around from just rescue, but becoming quite a dominant regional player. Without urgent intervention, the engineering and steel sector of Zimbabwe can become a market for imported finished goods with zero local manufacturing. I can give one example of a company that used to make beautiful competitive electric motors here. We had actually two dominant players producing, but they've shut down those sections. And they said it is better for us just to import wholly manufactured products and supply the market. But you know, when you look at the multiplier effect, the consequences and the opportunities lost on this market, they are just terrible. So that is a challenge and food for thought for us. Next challenge, please. Next slide, please. We have opportunities. We are really in exciting times here, with growth in the mining sector towards a $12 billion economy, agriculture and infrastructural development. We have to tap into the opportunities that are presented in this sector. And the good thing is that, you know, mines, they do not only consume steel during the construction phase alone. During operation, you have continuous consumption of products like mill balls, you see, and you know, some bearings, products for the conveyance, etc. So that is a huge opportunity. Agriculture, you know, the implements, they continue to be used, wearing out, replacements, and infrastructural development. Then we have the commissioning of the Dinson Iron and Steel Company, DISCO, and commencement of production of steel. This is a good opportunity because it has really covered the gap, the yawning gap that was left by Cisco. But here is our fear, which we can address by capacitating the downstream industry. Because if the downstream industry is not capacitated, then we don't have much to gain from DISCO, one. Then two, you know, with the ambition of DISCO to say, okay, we are starting at 0.6 million tons per annum, then we get to 1.2 million tons per annum next phase and get into the other phase. We don't want them to choke at 0.6 million tons per annum because on the local market, we haven't synchronized the downstream players and, you know, capacitated them to ensure that we can leverage on the presence of DISCO. This is very serious because I can give you an example of South Africa. South Africa has a capacity to make steel of 9 million tons per annum. One plant of South Africa is actually 1.8 million tons per annum. We are on 0.6 million tons per annum as a nation. But what is South Africa consuming right now, domestically? They are consuming 4.5 million tons per annum, which means right now they have excess capacity and they are struggling, yet having, you know, the infrastructure. So we have to be very smart and very strategic as we tap into this opportunity. We have e-mobility and emergence of electric vehicles. The whole engineering and steel value chain is triggered by this emerging subsector. I know the Ministry of Energy, I'm sure the Ministry of Transport have actually put in place a framework for that subsector. I'm sure we need to maybe collaborate with the different ministries to ensure that e-mobility emerges strong, knowing that there are huge opportunities there. The emergence also of a strong solar value chain, we should tap into that because in terms of the mounting structures for solar systems, that is, I mean, steel is used there, and we are looking at a pipeline of over 2,000 megawatts currently for Zimbabwe, but for the region, we have more than 10 gigawatts in terms of what to expect. So it's a huge opportunity to tap into. Then we also have a large pool of trained, skilled personnel whom we can leverage on. Next slide. We also do have operational flexibility and resilience presented by the small-scale steel producers. These are often ignored. You know, right now we have the giants like the DISCO, but You can imagine the operational flexibility that was presented by small players like the steel makers and the other whom we don't even know by name during the times of our crisis. So it is important to consolidate the primary steel production, looking at both the small scale players and the bigger players to ensure that our sector is healthy. India has done so. They have a good national steel policy, and 20% of their production is actually from the small scale players, presenting a good balance in competitiveness there. Zisco infrastructure, I would not dwell much into it because it's a private player on its own, but we know that despite the dilapidated infrastructure, there's still intact and competitive infrastructure there. The cinder plants, the foundry, the billet casting lines, bar road mills, these are opportunities that, through collaborations may actually help. Then we should also look at maximizing the use of technologies that use non-coking coal in steel production, because right now coke is the major ingredient, and the challenge that is presented by such strategic resources like coke is the same with that of scrap, whereby the demand is not only local but international. So in terms of security of supply, what happens if coke is fetching better prices on the export market rather than the local market? You see that the competitiveness of our local steel can also be. Then we should also explore and maximize novel technologies that cost effectively utilize low-grade iron ore. We say the opportunity that we have is also abundance of the iron ore resource, because we are sitting at more than 30 billion tons. But that 30 billion tons is generally of 43% grade. It means that is low grade. So we have to maximize on that opportunity. Then we have to tap into technologies. We have institutions here, research and development, universities. These are exciting topics to see how best low-grade iron can be used efficiently, cost-effectively. We can go to the next slide, please. Then the key performance metrics there. We had a baseline in 2021 of those different subsectors and how they were faring in terms of range. Always there's a mixed bag. There are those who are performing well and those who are struggling. But the foundry and the automotive industry are the ones that are struggling most. But of course, our analysis ignores one important aspect, that we are looking at the surviving companies, and we can say these are doing well. But really we haven't brought much to assess how many companies have closed. It's also important, but this is something that we will look at it. How many companies are closing and how many are emerging, to make sure that we have even a more accurate picture of the system. But the estimated average is there currently. We have ranging from 20% to 48%. So we still have a long way to go, and the outputs of such deliberations and recommendations will ensure that we get where we want to get to. Benchmarking, we have to be fully aware of what we are competing with, because the imports are a real threat to us. So we have two key routes there: the blast furnace, basic oxygen furnace route to production, and the electric arc furnace route. And on the local market, our cost per ton, we are talking of 680 to 900. US dollars per ton. EAF routes 700 to 1,000 per ton. But globally, we have a range. Globally, we are generally in the range. But you see there on scrap, what the local market can say we can offer and compete, looking at between $200 and $300. But on the export market, scrap is fetching about $400 US dollars. So you see why, even in terms of preference, the scrap supply is preferring to export. The least cost producers are India, China, and Russia. So you see 500 to 600 and 600 to 700 US dollars per ton. I'm very much convinced that we can also compete as least cost producers and in turn make our value chain very competitive. Next slide. We look at our production capacity in Africa. We are sitting at around 0.7 million tons per annum. Zambia is slightly above 0.5 million tons per annum. Regionally, it's quite a fierce competitor to us because they are also looking at continuous capacitation of their industry. And those who observe, they can see that there is quite a lot from Zambia that is also coming here. You have Algeria, greater than 5 million tons per annum. South Africa, like I said, they have 9 million tons per annum, but actually they have an excess capacity. I read some of the articles right now. They recognized explicitly Zimbabwe as a threat to their steel industry. So they are not relaxing. They are saying, but with this excess capacity, how can we make sure that with the emergence of increased capacity in Zimbabwe, how do we continue to compete? So it's important to look at our competitors in that. Egypt, 10 million tons per annum. So what it means is we really have to build a very competitive steel value chain, because we are operating in the same African continental free trade area, and the best computer will take the market. Next slide, please. Then globally, there we are. We've talked of China, we've talked of India. In 10 years, they actually doubled their capacity, their production capacity. China sitting on over 1,200 million tons per annum. So the competition, it is real, and we really have to be deliberate and serious in terms of enhancing our competitiveness. Otherwise, we'll continue to cry foul of imports, and right now there's over 690 million tons per annum of overproduction capacity that exists globally. So China and India, they are the dominant producer. What is interesting is that whilst we have that overcapacity, but you see India is actually pushing towards 300, getting to the 300 million tons per annum mark. Why? Because they've realized that they don't care about the overproduction capacity as long as they are the most competitive player. So this is how we should look at it. Okay, next. Okay, this was more like a value chain map now, because started tracking at each and every point so that we are able to eliminate every constraint there. My apologies, it's not clear, but in the detailed report, for those who are interested in seeing the detailed value chain map, then you can see it. That is the value chain map. You can continue, please. Next slide. So this is too detailed. for you to see here, but I just presented it for you to see. So that you know that contained in the report is that detailed value chain, so that you can track every. So can you kindly go back a bit to the, yes. So that is a spatial layout of the value chain map in Zimbabwe, with interesting clusters there. Not deliberate clusters, but imagined by nature of existence of certain important raw materials. You see there around Wange, those dotted lines, you know, we have lots of activities in terms of the coal mining and also coke production. And you see some of the linkages that are there with the other key areas of interest. Blawa, there existed an engineering cluster that would feed from the finished products. We have a Manise cluster there, but you see there, when you see the dotted line there is Manise there, but there's also an interesting area in Weza there, where there is a resource of about over 400 million tons of iron, or resource that is there. We have to look at that, combine that with also the Kwekwe cluster. You can see that we can have a very exciting iron and steel value chain there. Then when you look down there where you have Mashingo and the Simbi, and you know, towards Jerez there you have also some core Tuli towards Bait Bridge, all can fit into that very interesting value chain. So we have really to look at that with excitement and build a very strategic and competitive iron and steel value chain when we look at those possibilities. Next slide, please. Then we have some policy insights there, the capacitation and strengthening of policy-making institutions and well-defined arrangements towards strong policy design and implementation. Because right now we've heard of, you know, the multiple duplications, so many licenses that are required, bureaucracy, and so once we start capacitation and defining those arrangements at that level, it becomes a beginning point in terms of, effective and efficient policy making and implementation. Then we also discuss protection versus open market policies. Infant industry protection, organic combination of protection and open market. We have to deliberate on those, taking a leaf from what the other countries did. Like when you look at China, it actually uses an organic combination of protection in the open market to get where they are. So obviously, when your competitor advises you, they would just want you to open your market because it's to their advantage. But we have to look at, such options. When you look at Korea, like your postcodes, actually, when it was starting, they protected the infant industry. They put measures so that it could develop whilst capacitating and competitive. Protect prioritization of strategic sectors, because resources obviously are not always, are not abundant to everyone. So that streamlining to high impact areas is quite important. Then there are debates around nationalization, state-owned enterprises versus privatization. There's a mixed bag of success stories and failures there. When you look at China and the Bao steels with nationalization, but when you look at Zimbabwe, it's vice versa. We did not succeed. But at one time, as a RISCO, actually national election at one time worked. So these have to be debated openly, and there are some insights in the report as far as that is concerned. Then inclusiveness of SMEs and local players in the steel value chain. I've once alluded to that, that in India, SMEs have 20% stake in the steel value chain, according backed by their national steel policy. But on the other hand, China right now is actually consolidating and closing most of their SMEs. Actually 200 million tons per annum equivalent of SMEs are closed. So we have to deliberate on that. But as for us, you see that SMEs play quite a huge role, because we also have small high-grade ores that are dotted around the countries, which do not make sense to the big giants. But at local level, you know, that could sweat all their mills and, you know, make sense in terms of, you know, employment at local level, supply for the local market. You must remember that when ZISC was in operation, the local market could only consume about 30% of that 1 million ton per annum, meaning the rest was for the export market. So these small players can actually synchronize well with even the local market. So when we are looking at capacity and inclusiveness, it is very important to look at that. You look at some of the high-grade mines around Kwekwe that are there for iron ore. The resource is very small. You can't call a foreign investor to say, can you tap into this? They are not interested. So when we look at inclusiveness, we are looking at those pointers. Then investment attraction policies. When you start the steel industry and how this strong, this strong steel value chains emerged, you see that their success stories have hinged on investment attraction factors. When you look at China and India, who are currently now the least cost producers and the giants or the leaders in the steel industry. Then you also have technology transfer, innovation, research and development, and capacity building. Bao Steel, when China developed their iron and steel industry, first of all, they started by importing technology. And when they imported technology, they made a deliberate move to study those technologies. They could not even manufacture a blast furnace in China. But right now, your Bao Steels are one of the best manufacturers of blast furnace, basic oxygen furnace technology. Since the 1930s, 1938 or 1940s there, to date, we've been using blast furnace technology. But our challenge is, with all that knowledge, what components of such technologies can we produce locally? So that technology transfer is very important. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Market-driven policies versus resource-driven policies. It is interesting to note that, you know, we have countries like Australia who are actually leaders as far as the high-grade iron ore resource is concerned. But they are nowhere near being the best in steel production. Why have they resorted to say, no, let's stick to producing the iron ore resource and not bother much about the value addition? So, you know, we present these things so that when we are deliberating and saying we have over 30 billion tons of the iron ore resource, we want to beneficiate all the 40 billion tons. Policy-wise, what are we saying? China has also huge resources of low-grade iron ore. But you see, they prefer to import the raw material to value add rather than to exploit their own local resources. Why? These are very interesting engagements that can help us policy-wise to, you know, to have our strategy right. Scrap and critical material, raw material security of supply, I talked about it, that with the coking coal, high-grade iron ore and everything, how do we ensure we have security of supply? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have the resource, then in terms of your own local consumers, they have secured that resource. Scrap has been a good example. It's there, but the foundry, ironically, is crying foul. It can happen with coking coal. It can happen with anything. So we have to make sure that in terms of security of supply, we have something that is very relevant and practical. Then environment and decarbonization efforts towards net zero emissions and other environmental considerations. When we are investing in the steel value chain, let's never ignore environmental sustainability, because our competitors are not ignoring it. China is closing down all the plants with high carbon intensity, and they are moving towards net zero and green steel. That will affect, if we are to import, then we know that we have to be serious about environmental sustainability and decarbonization efforts. So whatever investment is coming in the steel industry, it has to be vetted against environmental sustainability for us to be competitive, so that we don't have investment dumping here. Then we have global competitiveness versus import substitution policies, then also policies for funding the manufacturing sector, where we are saying identify sources of investment, funding both domestic and foreign, and study of the attention to attract investment, targeting our strategic subsectors. Then also have to look at the forest allocation when we are looking at the strategic value chain, sector value chains. Next, please. So our recommendations, speakers who have spoken before me have dwelt much on recommendations. So in summary, we have the consolidation of primary steel production and the enhancement of competitiveness, leveraging on the abundant and high quality raw materials, which include coking coal, iron ore, and limestone, amongst others. Then the capacitation of downstream players in the steel value chain to build a locally sustainable but globally competitive steel value chain. Then we give the necessary policy support to the sector, and also looking at capacity, technical capacity building, innovation in the research and development. So with those remarks, I would like to thank you for listening.
For that submission, meticulously presented, and much to take away from that very report. May just run for 3 minutes, then I will be making follow-up questions on that very basis. We'll start with Dr. Duri. Your 3 minutes begins right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Duri from Letu Asset Management. Some of you may know it as the head office of fossil engineering. I represent a group of companies from there. So, 3 minutes, 3 minutes. 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 I've done extensive works, I would say, in the iron and steel industry, having been a previous employee for Kafka. I've been involved in Cisco Steel. I'm an advisory board member for Cisco. And I've done a PhD. My doctorate is coming from a machine design point of view. So I now design factories for a living. And a factory, like we've always said, it's basically iron and steel, concrete, as well as cement. That is what basically makes a steel structure. So as a country, what we need to do, I've said this before, we need to make sure that the items that go into our buildings are as low cost as is practically possible. Once a building structure is done, it attracts investments in all the feeder or input industries. If I put up a building here, it means the guy who is at Kafka now making cables has got work. It means the person at Mangura now has work because now has to do mining. It means everybody who is supplying chemicals in the flocculation processes of the copper mining processes actually has work. So right now I'm in the process of constructing or setting up a new factory, and for your information, 45 containers, each of 28 tons of steel are being imported from China. That's 1,300 tons of steel. That's lost capacity that we could have actually generated as a local entity, as iron and steel. And how are the Chinese doing it? I've done extensive visits in their country. What they do is they start with the product. If our main product, I'll just give a local example, which I've personally created myself, the small mill, hammer mill, Chiguruguru. That's my patent, it's my product. If you Google, you will see it on the internet. But what it has done to Mbari, it has revolutionized the way steel is being made there. And the steel that we are using there right now is all coming mainly from scrap metal. We are going into old factories, breaking them up, and setting up those small little things. But per day, more than 1,000 or so are being sold. How much steel is that? The challenge that we are now having is that the blades, which is the perishable, the consumable in that, have to be very high strength. When I did the initial design, I did use spring steel. So if you check for those who have the big trucks, I'm sure you can see all your spring steels in your bonnets, in your big trucks are disappearing. Now the scrap metal dealers are importing spring steels from South Africa because now we've run out of supply. So that's a challenge also to the local industry. Dinson, we now need steel production with stainless steel, high strength, just to supply that small little market. But I've just given you one small example. We have the trucks business, the agriculture industry. All those guys, they also need their own steels. So so what we need to do in brief is we need to set up workshops which are dedicated, have a defined product that will be the pool for the steel, and then we have a mass production candidate, like in this particular case, the hammer mill. We have a spare parts breakdown who is going to supply and at what rate. We have individual suppliers of each individual component. We then form an industrial cluster, which then goes into an industrial park with everybody aligned to that single production. This is what then brings the cost of production down. A marketing team to push the volumes to the external market, and we start exporting, and we start having the workshops to produce, like the leads, foundries and so on. And to keep it up, we kept it up with the research. This product started with the research, so the research starts, and then the product follows, and then the market then follows. That is what I am here to submit today. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Dr. Lee, for that submission. Right, we'll now hear from Mr. Vibanya Kuchika, Kafka CEO.
Thank you, Eben. My name is Vimbai Nakujula. I'm currently the CEO of Kafka. So in terms of the engineering iron and steel industry, I've spent almost 8 years in there, first with Zimbabwe, where I looked at the fabrication and machined components with Millibrand. I had an exposure to the automotive industry as well, as most of our equipment was mobile equipment that was supplied into the market. And now with Kafka, I'm into, Kafka is mostly into cable manufacturing. In fact, Kafka's mission is to manufacture and supply cables for the transmission and distribution of energy and information. And at the core of what we do, we supply to the domestic market as well as the export markets. And in terms of the key selling point of our product is quality. And in terms of quality, we're looking at the resistance or the conductivity of the cable, of the conductors. We are looking at the mechanical properties like the breaking load or the tension, its ability to hold the tension, as well as the insulation resistive capability, which in some it's tested through pressure testing. So whilst we focus on these things, we look at what we've just been discussing today in terms of competitiveness. So our desire is to be the most competitive cable supplier in the country and in the region. And in that, there have been some linkages between our capacity utilization as well as some forces like protection and the absence of protection. We have had to contend with, to a certain extent, substandard products as well as the unfair trade practices that have been influenced by our competitors from other nations. However, I do also acknowledge, yes, there's been some good quality products coming into the country in some instances, but that is rare considering the factors that influence competitiveness in the sector. And in terms of the factors that influence competitiveness, it's basically the supply chain, the configuration of the supply chain. And I was pleased to note the engineer's report where you mentioned that China and India are some of the least cost producers of iron and steel. And so it goes for copper as well, and to a certain extent aluminium. These, to a large extent, they produce, or their costs are 20 to 30% less than what we get from our neighbors and in the region. Zimbabwe, on its own, is still developing its capacity. In fact, in the past, it used to produce copper through Mangura, but that sort of like tapered down, and now we are still yet to have local capacity for copper production from a primary production perspective. So the supply chain is a big factor, and in some instances, if they were proper quality producers of cables, you would think it would be easy, it would be cheaper to import cable, complete cable from these least cost primary producers of raw material, as it has been alluded by the engineer. Then the second two other factors obviously are the conversion cost and the administrative cost. On the conversion cost, it's mostly the economies of scale, the capacity utilization. And that is what we've been grappling with. And one of the tasks that I had to undertake when I joined Kafka was to undertake a factory audit where I get to understand all the parameters from an engineering perspective influencing the effectiveness. And we have identified areas, including power, where we are currently installing a solar plant to augment our power supply from ZESA on the cost perspective as well as reliability to a certain extent. Then thirdly, the administrative aspect, where as a formal business, we have to contend with taxes that are associated with formal businesses in a highly informalized country. And obviously that also goes to the extent to which, I will always talk about protection, considering the substandard or the capacity that we have as a country to test cables, or the nature of our product requires extensive testing to ensure quality. And we do not currently have such capacity to test the quality, and therefore the protection of the industry or the institutions to protect the consumer and the end user are very critical and pivotal. And those are some of the things that obviously, as we give context to the report, we always need to compare ourselves to.
Thank you, Mbai, for that initial submission. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. We will now hear from Engineer P. Musademba, Neotech Skills and Technical College Principal.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to join this distinguished panel as we reflect on the 2025 State of Engineering, Iron and Steel Industry Report. I'm coming here as the founding director and current principal of Neotech Skills and Technical College, with a background as a lecturer and researcher at Harare Institute of Technology, currently part-time lecturer and researcher there, and I've done extensive work in steel manufacturing. My last research was on a sustainable technological framework that enhances business performance, and the case study was for Zimbabwe metal recycling industry. So I'm really glad to be part of this panel. As the report highlighted that there is both progress and challenges, it shows that the steel industry remains central to Zimbabwe's industrialization, yet it is constrained by skills shortages, outdated technologies, and sustainability pressures. So what really stands out to me is that the future of the sector will not only be defined by tons of steel produced, but by how we produce it and who is empowered to drive it forward. So, steel plants can be built with money. We can have a lot of companies request for finances, but industries are sustained by people. So without investing in skills, the furnaces will obviously grow cold. And also on sustainability, the world is moving towards green steel. I'm someone who is deeply committed to sustainability, innovation, and engineering education. I remember on our last meeting with EISAZ team, they gave me a nickname, LEDS, because I was always talking about low emission development strategies. And I'm also here to really talk about it today. So by investing in recycling, renewable energy integration, and energy efficient technologies, we can actually leapfrog and compete globally, whilst I also acknowledge that we have abundance of coal, which we should use, but we cannot just lag behind, look at China giving us innovations and just be adopters of other countries and innovators. And on sustainability concerns, my personal opinion is that we should also look at the outdated furnaces that are around and make an effort to skill up the people around, collaborate with academia, engineering institutions like HIT, for example. There are quite good machines there, but we are also seeing our industry, the government, even academia operating in silos. So a collaboration may actually make us more competitive globally. I've also noted that recycling is a bit underutilized, as explained by engineer Nyemba, that some of the materials are being exported. And then I've also noted that there is investment needs infrastructure, research and development, and partnerships are needed to position Zimbabwe competitively in the region. So as someone who is a skills development advocate, I hope this discussion will help us look into how we can skill up, add skills to the people that we have, and also utilize the skill that is just lying idle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Presentation. Now, perhaps as follow-up, Engineer Les on Linon. Well, the question would be, the previous speaker, Engineer Nyemba, did allude to the fact that what China did in order for them to be successful, they imported equipment and they studied the equipment and were able to customize some elements from that and develop, of course, products and equipment that was relevant to the needs of the Chinese market. Now the question is this: as a player where skills are concerned, what should be done, could be done, would be done to transform that narrative where the Zimbabwean landscape is concerned, especially when the skills aspect is concerned? Engineers are being trained, and of course relevant players are being trained, but how do we leapfrog from where we are to the most advanced level of technology, especially from a skills and investment perspective, to be pragmatic?
Thank you so much for the question. So, no industry transformation is possible without people transformation. Even if you want to import the technology and bring it here, what I would advise is to have innovation hubs inside our industries and incubation hubs. We also have innovation hubs and incubation hubs at our institutions, for example, but if you operate in silos, like I said, they just remain centers of learning, but the education that will come from them will not beneficiate the industry. So I would also suggest a curricular development that will involve the players, because the players in the industry are the people that know what they really need and what they want the people to be skilled on. So I'm calling out for joint apprenticeships between industry and colleges as well, not just that Kafka may just have an apprentice department and they'll be training in silo, whilst at our college, at different universities, we have programs that have a different curricula that speaks to Kafka. So I think collaboration will actually help.
Thank you very much. I would concur with your submission. I was at the Harare Institute of Technology Innovation about 3 weeks back, and you can actually see the degree of innovation that's taking place within those academic institutions. But I think the big question is how to bridge that gap between academia and, of course, industry. Perhaps a more pragmatic approach would be relevant, right? You want to weigh in, Doc?
Right. Thank you very much. I had the experience of going into China. I'm sure you've all heard about the new vertical cement mill that was commissioned by the president some 2 years ago at Lafarge, or then Kaya now. I was involved in partially the design, construction, and commissioning of that plant. But as I speak, when we were doing the design, we did the design with FIFA engineers. But we bought the plant, Germany. They took the designs that we had agreed on, took them to China for manufacturing, and as I speak, the guys who were doing the manufacturing of this same plant are now contacting me to say, we want to now replace Raymond mills, which we all know in industry for pulverization, with a vertical mill, because that's now the new latest design. The design that we had put in there proved to be the best design in the world in terms of pulverization at that time. And now they've taken that, they've created policies that allowed these countries to change a few things in the design and then patent it as their own. Now they're beginning to sell it as their own. So it's no longer going to be a German FIFA product. It's now a Chinese product at 40 or 50% of the cost that we initially paid for. So there's something that we need to learn there. That's one. And then the second thing, the workshops that make those big machines you see in industry. China has got a deliberate policy to say for this ball mill, the 200 ton per hour, for example, diameter 4 meters, the machine, the vertical milling machine that makes this product will not sell it to anyone. It's made by Chinese engineers, special design, but if you go there to say, I requested to say, can we buy this? They said, no, this is a strategic machine. You can only buy the product. So we need to see also how from a research point and from the innovation hubs, from the industrial centers that we create, how we can also create our own machines with a competitive advantage. Like I've told you on the hammer mill, I patented the technology. So you only see it in Zimbabwe because that's where I've allowed it to be produced. But now we need to extend it to the rest of Africa, to the rest of the developed world. That is doing gold mining. So there's something that we actually need to learn from there as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, Doc. Now, Vimba, you made reference to the need for supply chain reconfiguration as being an essential aspect of revitalizing the engineering iron and steel sector of Zimbabwe. What elements would be critical to make that a reality?
Thank you, Eben. So, one of the interesting points that we continue to refer to is China. China is the #1 industrialized economy in the world, mostly because of their ability to configure the supply chains. They've done it from a planned perspective and also adopted some liberal thinking in the process. They haven't just pushed it all to the private sector. They've developed institutions that look into the procurement. I think Engineering mentioned that they have tended to rely on getting resources from other countries. At the same time, they are producing much cheaper on their own. One of the things that is happening, or that is happening in the recent past, is the introduction of DISCO, the Dinson Iron and Steel Company. And one of the catastrophes that we have experienced is the collapse of Cisco. And those things, or those industries, were pillars to our industry. And most of the value chain partners, and most of us are like Kafka. Kafka, we rely on copper producers. And from a copper production, you also notice that in the Southern Africa, most of the copper is produced for Glencore or other players in the international space. But we do not have control. We can produce cheaper than what we're getting against the LME or the exchange pricing. But because the people that are controlling the supply chain, they do not have similar interest to our own as either Southern Africa or Central Africa. And therefore we always tend to be penalized based on how much they are stocking, how much they have in reserve against what we require. So from a pricing perspective, we are at the mercy of these commodity brokers. Secondly, China, if you look at it, it has got capability to also influence when to release raw materials and when to withhold stocks. We have seen with the commodity pricing fluctuations in terms of platinum and all these other commodities. So from a country perspective and a regional perspective, I think we need to really consider that perspective. Furthermore,
if you may round up, please.
Okay, furthermore, I'll just quickly, the other end of the supply chain, the demand value chain. So from our space, like Kafka, we have got more than capacity, we have got more than enough capacity that is required in the country, whether by our utilities company, by our contractors and the retail market. But what is lacking is the organization of the market to influence the market, to first take locally. I was glad to see the essay that was put, essay 46 of 2025 with regards to the control of import targeted at Dinson's Iron and Steel Company. That makes sure that whatever Steelstate invested in the plant, they are able to recoup. But at the same time, I think the government or the stakeholders will ensure that they produce competitively, and which is also the interest that we as from a Kafka perspective.
Right, thank you very much to our panelists. We will now open it up to the floor for questions. Of course, we've got our esteemed panelists who are right up here, but we also have other key players within this race sector. We've got, of course, the leaders from NEC Engineering, Iron and Steel Industry. We've also got the EISAZ executive as well as board, and we have, of course, the ministry, ably, of course, represented here, and of course, we've got the Reserve Bank here represented. So I will now open it up to the floor for any questions that they may want attended to in this very forum. Now, please note that I will ask that you be upstanding and then you introduce yourself and the organization that you represent before you can relay your question in that particular order. Roving Mike, are we good to go? All right, thank you. Okay, questions, here we go. Going once, do we have any takers from the house? Going twice? Right, we have a taker. We have a gentleman right at the back. Sir, kindly introduce yourself and relay your question. I think we'll take 3 questions and allow our panelists to respond once they have been forwarded. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Steelstate from Midlands Metals. My submission is in support of Dr. Louis' discussion points. But what I want to say is our major challenge is that currently in Zimbabwe, we are now in a position to manufacture amalgams. We are now in a position to manufacture amalgam barrels. We are now in a position to manufacture ball mills. But we still have containers coming from China. We have actually mentioned that China, what they do is, if they go to Germany, they buy what they want, they go back to their country, then they start manufacturing that plant and it is protected. But for us, we are not protected. We have youngsters that are coming from technical colleges, who are fabricators, who are engineers. They are in a position to manufacture. It's a simple machinery, but we are not supporting them. And that's why our unemployment is on the rise. We need to support each other. We need to ensure that we protect each other, especially for those that we are in a position to manufacture. Then my next submission is also to do with the way we structure our programs. Right, like right now today we are here in this house. The most affected people are not in this house. I haven't heard a mention of Chamber of Mines. I haven't heard a mention of Zimbabwe Miners Federation. I haven't heard a mention of Junior Chamber of Mines. Those are the markets for our products, for foundries, even for the steel, even for the hammer that we are talking about. They will be meeting in their own setups and discussing issues that really affect us. That's why they end up importing, because they don't know what we are producing. They do not know our capabilities. If you look at it now, mill balls, especially the castable one, it's as good as they are now history. Because they go out there, they are told the best way to process gold is using high chromium, is to use forged balls. But for the past 100 years they've been using castables and producing 300 kgs of gold. You talk of your blanket, Fred and Baker, but we are not there when they are being presented with such alternatives. So my submission is that what we need to do going forward is to ensure that the people who are key for supporting our sectors, they have to be present, they have to be part and parcel of our discussion, so that whenever we are, the government is coming up with a policy, they are coming up with a policy in a position where they understand that we are in a position to produce. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dinesh, for that submission. I see a hand here from I can see a hand from Sakai. I see a gentleman who's right there, so we'll have the gentleman, then we'll have Sakai come in as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, facilitator. I come from Dinson and Steel Company. My name is Shogo Joseph. I happen to be the public relations manager for Dinson. I have 2 submissions to make. Of course, those 2 have already been submitted to by the panelists and those that spoke earlier. One is the mislink between training and reality. Dinson has started production, and we all know the demise of our industries since the collapse of Cisco. No doubt that some of the lecturers at universities and training colleges may be very theoretical and like practicality because there are no industries. Not necessarily that there are no industries, but they are there, but very few. I'm looking at skills like metallurgists and so forth. You may go to a training institute and find the lecturer himself maybe has not been exposed to. I know Minister at Mines, School of Mines, they've introduced the courses like iron steel making. I wonder where they are doing their practical stage. Never been to Dinson. That gap needs to be removed. We need to come to reality. And then there was the issue of capacity that was alluded to. My question is, what do we mean by capacity? Who capacitates? I'm asking this deliberately because of experience. At one time, I received a call. In fact, I received a visitor at Dinson. He came, he was actually coming from, because I had offices here in Harare. That time I was based at Dinson, so he came. We have a very good workshop there. What did he say? He said, look here, I've come and referred by your CEO to come and look at the workshop because I want to run this workshop. I said, gentlemen, I don't understand you. You want to come and run this workshop? Some people think that Dinson is the one to capacitate. I don't know how, financially or what. I think the public needs to know how do they get capacitated. Is it by government? Is it by training institutions? Is it by Dinson? When we look at specifically the value chain for the steel industry. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Shoko. Now, Sakai here had a hand up before we move on to the next set of questions.
For Bravo Charlie.
Thank you very much. My name is Sekai Kubarika from the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries. I just had, I think, 1 or 2 short interventions to make. And the first one is really to respond to the issue about the markets, that the market for engineered products maybe are not in the room when this is discussed. I also wanted to offer another perspective, that our observation right now, when you look at participation at the Chamber of Mines annual conferences, is very heavy, because that's where their customers are going there to try and find them. But the structure is such that there's individual participation there, and the individual exhibition fees or sponsorship in order to get space to exhibit there is quite high as well. So individual entities may struggle to afford the space there, but there's an opportunity that maybe as a collective, the industry could actually schedule to have a tent at the annual Chamber of Mines conference and exhibit products that you would have selected there, so that while the whole market, the whole mining market is there, they have the products. Maybe because I'm just thinking that it may be easier for us to go to them than to bring them here. And we are happy to collaborate and to support this. We have started an initiative which we have called Manufacturing for Manufacturing, and we are then also doing manufacturing for mining, manufacturing for tourism, to try and promote local manufacturing to be customers for our local industries at a B2B level. So for instance, right now at Sanganai, we have an exhibition on manufacturing for tourism. We selected companies that manufacture for the tourism industry will be able to exhibit, and we are pulling resources and also providing some backup support to ensure that that goes well. So that's the idea I wanted to propose to EISAZ, that we can work together on that for the next Chamber of Mines. Then on the training, I was also struck, I think 2 years ago, we supported the formation or formalization of the TDM Association, the Tool Dye and, is it mold? Yeah, the Tool Dye and Mold Association. And there was support from PTSA in South Africa, which is supporting both technical and apprenticeship training. And I'm not sure whether members of the TDM Association are in the room. The ministry, I think, was also consulted. It's a good opportunity to now actually take a structured approach to build these capacities. I'm just glad to note that there's a dedicated college that is addressing some of these capacities. So I also see that as an area of collaboration between our various institutions, and appealing to the ministry that maybe this could be advanced. And one of the practical things coming out of the issue of, I think what was mentioned by Mr. Shokote about where are people having these their practicals. We once did a SNAP survey in Blaawai, where we were trying to benchmark what levels of technology are at the universities versus what is at the companies, just to see if there was a gap there, and to try and explore whether there could be collaboration. Then again, I think this is a practical area to again, I think, take forward. If we can find companies that are willing, that may be actual practical lessons, some of their practicals, if the universities are not equipped, companies could provide that. So happy to engage on those particular areas going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sekai, Chief Executive of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries. Those three submissions, first one coming from Ignatius, second one from Mr. Shoko, then of course the last one coming from the Chief Executive of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries. Now, we also have Engineer Nyemba, who is on standby to respond to some of the elements that have been presented, and of course the other participants here present.
right, thank you very much. I'll start with the hammer mills contribution as an interested player there. What I want the nation to note is that hammer mills are produced by certain designs, and those designs are patented and owned. This is why you continue to see containers coming from China, because they own the patents of the products that they are selling. So if a patent is lodged, it works for 20 years. After 20 years, it is then thrown onto the open market. That's when you are allowed to just copy. But in my case, 2015, 2016, we started the wet milling of the single mills. Somebody in China went and patented it. Then 2019, I then started by patenting the Luri mill, which is the powder one. So for the next 20 years, from 2020, March 2020, up to March 2040, no one is ideally allowed to produce that dry powder mill, because I patented the technology and I own it. The people that we are seeing that are producing now, that we are saying let's support them, they're actually doing it out of patent. I have the right to sue, but I'm not doing it because it's a national cause that we are addressing. But other than Zimbabwe, you don't find that mill being produced anyway. We have to export it from here, and the country should get royalties and foreign currency inflows, because it originated from here. It's us, the children. So that's one area that we need to move on. And then in terms of, we also need to move with the technology. The purpose of that mill was to replace the ball mills. I'm sure you all confirm that it's actually grinding better than what ball mills do. So with time, you will see it's actually slowly replacing the ball mills. The 7 ton per hour one is now coming out of production. You'll be seeing it on the market very soon. So the link between industry and college, definitely that one is key. It's critical. I've personally left industry before to become a lecturer at HIT, involved in the setting up of technology centers, just to try and bridge that gap, and then went back to industry. So there's a big area that we actually need to be addressing there. And the Dinson workshop is tailored for Dinson products. So if somebody comes and says, I want to run a Dinson workshop, there's a lot of products that workshop can only produce specifically for Dinson. There are other workshops with other machinery that are not in there that may be required for a totally different product altogether. So Dinson workshop is mainly specifically meant to address what Dinson is producing. But if you have a copper plant, for example, you may require a totally different workshop altogether. Those are the manufacturing centers that we were saying, let's form industry-based, product-based. That's my contribution. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Doc, for that. The other panelists, anything that you might want to respond to? Engineer Musademba.
Okay, thank you so much. I would want to respond on the mismatch in colleges and lecturers being too theoretical. That concern is very valid, and too often our graduates leave the college with theoretical knowledge, which is misaligned with industry. This is because there is also limited industry-college partnerships. I've also noted a lot of gatekeeping in our engineering institutions, engineering companies. I don't know why. Maybe you guys would want to protect your technologies, but then you also require graduates that are job ready. So through attachments, mentorships, we also have a lot of struggle getting our students for internships, especially in the engineering. Maybe because there is also low production, and maybe the budgets will also be constraining. Even if the attachment is for free, if the attachee is not getting paid, believe me, it's really hard. It's a struggle. So I think through attachments, maybe mentorships and co-designed training programs, we can also bridge this gap. And the solution is not really to reduce the theory, but maybe bridge it with practice, like what the previous speaker said, Dr. Luri. And maybe you can also have guest lecturers from industry, like someone who's doing part-time. These days, maybe because the lecturer salaries are so low, we are also having a challenge where the previous part-time lecturers who are well invested with technologies are now refusing to take up the part-time teaching roles, and that would really help because they are in industry full-time and they will actually come with real scenarios in the classroom. So I think maybe we should also build trust where education providers and companies work together as partners, not as outsiders. If we get this right, we won't need to import labor. In the report, I'm sure I noted some company had to import skilled labor, which actually tells us that there is a serious gap in local capacity. Yes, we have the graduates, but sometimes when you need someone to do maintenance of a certain equipment that we have imported, you actually find that there is no one who can do that. So it means that there is really a shortage. So we should also acknowledge the reality that gatekeeping within the companies will also limit access to real opportunities and real processes. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Wembai?
Yes, mine is just a support of the comment by my brother here who was talking about promoting the infant companies that are developing technologies and equipment to service the mining, the industry, the agricultural sectors. So, as I've alluded, there's been a lot of fragmentation of the engineering, iron and steel industries, and I think the report delves into that. And if we do not take immediate action to support, especially looking at the endangered companies and industries that are core to the value chains, we will find ourselves being in a place which we continue to talk about, that of collapse. So I do look forward, PS, I do look forward to more engagements and how we can collaborate both from an industry perspective and from an institutional perspective to build our industries going forward.
Thank you very much, Wembai. A round of applause for our panelists. Perhaps one of the key takeaways there, a call for the participation of our industry where other forums are concerned. A good example that was highlighted was, of course, the annual Chamber of Mines, where there's been a clarion call to say, how about we have the EISAZ getting to participate and put forward the recommendations, the products that are being produced from this very industry. Once again, a round of applause to our panelists, Dr. Luri Ruletu, Head of Group Research and Development, Mr. Ivaino Kafka, Chief Executive, Neotech Skills and Technical College Principal. A round of applause as they take lead on the stage. Come on, we can give them a bigger pump. Much to, of course, take away from that, and that will be critical in terms of framing how we progress from this very conference. There was reference, of course, to the fact that you've got Dinson that is playing within the market, and it's a great pleasure that Dinson is right here. So I'm looking forward to interpersonal conversations with Dinson to find out how there can be collaborations when necessary with Dinson as well as the other players that are here. The purpose of this engagement is to come up with solutions that are industry relevant to what we are aiming to achieve as an economy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, at this particular point, you're aware that our guest of honor has been with us since the commencement of our program. He's been seated there with a listening ear, taking down some notes, and I saw several officials from the Ministry of Industry and Commerce who were here, who've been paying attention to what's been coming or obtaining from this very forum. And so at this particular point, we're about to receive the official keynote address and launch of the industry status report by our guest of honor. Ladies and gentlemen, representing the Minister of Industry and Commerce, N.M. Ndlovu, we have the Permanent Secretary, Dr. Thomas Utete-Ushe. A round of applause as he comes through. You sure can do better than that. You can do better than that. Yeah, you're welcome to stand, please. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. We may take our seats. The Director of Ceremonies. Eben, you are so blessed to be the Director of Ceremony on an event that is mainly driven by association, which is unique because it has a member association as a Ministry for Project. So I sit here and I come here and I stand, sit at the table, stand here as the guest of honor, representing the guest of honor, I must correct that. But I'm also a member of this association. That makes it so exciting. So I'll take advantage of this position and urge you to stop referring to the collapse of Cisco, because Cisco is part of ourselves as a Ministry of Industry and Commerce. We have decided and determined to resuscitate Cisco. That's why you see our GCEO sitting. So Cisco is going to come back and participate effectively. In those days of when we were doing the 1 million tons, we would certainly get there in partnership with DISCO. So it's going to be DISCO, Cisco, a partnership with everyone in this industry to make sure that we build this economy. Because the economy can only be built through this iron and steel industry. That's what I heard, and I believe that without that, we are very far from realizing our 2030 aspiration of being an upper middle income society by 2030. Now, I would like to acknowledge in absentia my Honorable Minister, N.M. Ndlovu, those permanent secretaries that were invited and couldn't make it. I want to acknowledge you. I also want to acknowledge my brother, Dr. Mate, from the Reserve Bank. It's important for you to be here so that you can start counting money that is going to come through from our experts, through our determined efforts. Senior government officials, my colleagues from the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, I acknowledge your presence. I also want to acknowledge the presence of the President of the EISAZ and the President, Chairman of the NEC for Iron and Steel, the two Chief Executive Officers of this uniquely collaborating effort, the NEC and yes, the EISAZ. So I heard it was labor and business owners coming together to produce a unique document, obviously with the support of our government and in particular the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. I want to acknowledge Sekai. We always find each other in the same room. I think it makes sense that we have got the same aim and objective. So we will be in the trenches together for a very long time. So it's always nice to see you here. And if there are any other CEOs of business member organizations I haven't seen, I acknowledge you. Distinguished guests that are here present, members of the media fraternity, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a great honor and privilege to stand before you today as we launch the State of Industry report for the engineering, iron, and steel sector. At the onset, I wish to commend the collaborative effort of the Engineering, Iron and Steel Association of Zimbabwe and the National Employment Council for the Engineering, Iron and Steel industry, who have worked tirelessly to produce this document. The document is solid, it looks nice, and it has got content. It's just not a cover, it's not something to go and file and put in your bookshelves. It's something that will make reference to, and I can promise you from the government point of view, and in particular from the Minister of Industry and Commerce, we definitely use this document to formulate our policy. And we say this time with a lot of seriousness and intention to make a difference, to support this effort. What I want to say, which is very clearly a feeling that I felt when I was sitting there, is I thought of people watching soccer either live at Faro Stadium or maybe watching on ZBC. And you see players, and you think you can do better. Can you imagine the frustration you have when you can't do anything about it? And you see players either missing an opportunity to score, then some actually then literally kicked maybe someone sitting next trying to show how you want to be part of an action, an activity that you cannot, and you are separated by physical barriers. And this is a lot of things that I think a lot of us do experience and feel like that when you're watching the economy of Zimbabwe, when you're watching players in the economy of Zimbabwe. You've got an idea and you can't do anything about it. Yet those days, the good news is those days are over from where we stand. While we are fortunate enough to be the players, we realize that we are not the only ones who have got the ideas and the skill to play this game. This game can be played equally well by those of us sitting in this room on the policy side, but do not have the opportunity to be sitting where we are sitting at the moment. So we will invite you, and this is an open invitation for all of us who have got the ideas and the willingness to support the policy formulation, which will see us progress this country. And this document, I welcome it as the first effort that is coming from this group to influence the play of how we are going to resuscitate and build the iron and steel industry of Zimbabwe, which will obviously have ripple effects of developing our country to the levels of our desire. I remember quite well Zimbabwe being a destination for benchmarking visits. I like and acknowledge the consultant, Dr. Nyemba. He came up with benchmarking, very important. In our ministries in government, we are always benchmarking. You in industry, players, we are always benchmarking. But I think we should be working towards creating Zimbabwe as a benchmarking destination again, to reclaim our position. And we can only do that through work like this, combining academia, practice, innovation, research. Dr. Dori has got something that he has offered. Many other offerings are there on the table, and we don't want to protect ourselves from people who steal our technology, but also use our technology for the benefit of our country. So the launch of this report is coming at an opportune time when the government is seized with crafting of the National Development Strategy 2. We all know what it is, 2, following strategy 1. We're expecting that the private sector will play a leading role in spearheading the efforts enunciated under the inclusive economic growth and structural transformation thematic group. So we are very certain that our economic development will be led by the private sector. We are under no illusion that we will be able to do that as government. We need government and private sector to come together and deliver the economic development that we so wish through the execution of NDS2. From a Ministry of Industry point of view, our contribution to NDS2 is through a policy document that I understand that all of us have participated in. This is the Zimbabwe National Industrial Development Policy 2, which is following our Z group, which obviously you here benefited from right from its inception. I remember immediately after launching the Z group policy, we had our conference in Kwekwe, which we were happy and fortunate to have our His Excellency coming in to grace our occasion, showing and demonstrating how important this meeting we have here today is to the development of Zimbabwe. Ladies and gentlemen, let me quickly highlight that the implementation of our policy document that I'm really talking about is progressing well. You would remember that ZNIDP 1 and 2, we had a gap of about 2 years, and this policy instrument came in to bridge that gap. And we, together with you, identified about 115 line items, action items. Some of them have been going on concurrently, but our quick evaluation has put us at about 65% implementation rate, which is very successful. And we would like to say, with your support, we've managed to see this success in implementation at this high level, which is a promise that if we set out targets and set out our policy issues, we can actually achieve them. And so we come into the next planning cycle for ZNIDP2 with optimism. So this optimism should inform us here today to say, when I come up with an idea, the ministry, the government will respond positively most of the time. And where we think that we are not able to, we are committed to give our practitioners, our partners, feedback. Because we view private sector as our partners for development, and we seriously would also be expecting private sector to work with government to ensure that we deliver the economic growth that we would like to see moving forward. So the report, which obviously was here led and driven by our consultant, Dr. Nyema, it clearly sets out the gap. And it spells out recommendations. I went through the recommendations. There were 4 or 5, and touching everyone. They were not mainly looking at government, but the recommendations, rightly so, illustrate the need for each and everyone to be part of the recovery process. And that actually talks to our old saying in Zimbabwe, apana kuti ani ninge aita sei ibasa raningi. No, it is our task. This generation has to live Zimbabwe better than where we found it. Ladies and gentlemen, since 1937, EISAZ has been strategic voice for business, championing policy advocacy, conducting research, and representing industry interests. Then equally, NEC has safeguarded industrial harmony through collective bargaining, wage setting, dispute resolution, and these two institutions together, they have contributed to the building of the Zimbabwe, and we challenge the same two institutions to take us further in this desired building of our nation. I'm pleased to note that the report that we saw today, that we are launching, confirms that engineering, iron, and steel sector is the backbone of industrialization. It provides the steel and machinery to build our roads, our dams, and bridges, the tools that power our mines and farms, and the components that feed into energy, automotive, and manufacturing industry. So, truly, it's not an exaggeration when we say without iron and steel, we are nowhere. So we need to do something about this. We need to ensure that we put we create some kind of Marshall Plan around iron and steel, so that we put all our resources into rebuilding this, which will be the booster for our economy. Today, the sectors employs just over 15,000 workers. I mean, from 55,000 during the glory days down to 15,000, and not explained by technological advancement, is a point for worry for both government and industry players, and creates a desire for us to reclaim that glory. We have a figure here that we're told, $640 million, that the revenues we are getting from the iron and steel industry. It's not significant enough for what we want. We are looking at this industry to provide that solution for us for building exports, value-added exports. We targeted last time, I think last year, we exported manufactured goods at, I think, $400-something million. Looking at the import bill, which those figures, some, depending on who we are talking to, we started 7 billion, some say up to 8-10 billion, but we are in that region in terms of imports. And where we have issues about the trade deficit. And the trade deficit can be addressed by this group sitting here. If we push our 640 million up into the billions for both internal consumption and exports. And I think it's possible. We can really push this one back. Dinson has 600,000 metric ton per annum integrated steel plant. Is great news, and we celebrate that. And we would like to ensure that we use it as tailwind. I had headwinds. So I want to introduce another word that also, so the Dinson will give us the tailwind to move faster in our aspiration of developing our own country. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to highlight some of the decisive interventions by the Ministry of Industry and Commerce in undertaking to revitalize this vital sector. We are currently involved and together with you in the drafting of the new iron and steel bill, which will provide a comprehensive legal framework to guide the growth of this industry. As part of this process, we have recently dispatched a technical team to Turkey on a benchmarking tour. And I also took advantage of my recent visit to India to look at other steel manufacturing plants as benchmarking, just to educate ourselves in trying to acquire and aspire to be like the best in class. That's the only way we think we can leapfrog, by not trying to start a new thing, but learning from that, those people who have been successful at this game before. So we would like to, and we are determined to protect domestic producers. And we have gazetted the statutory instrument imposing a 30% surtax on imported steel. And when we were in the briefing room with your president and chairman, an issue was raised of scrap metal, and I think the public sector is a responsibility and obligation to protect this industry. We might not have control over individual businesses, but there is a case for public procurement to support this important industry. I will try my level best to take this back, and I made a promise that for all scrap from public institutions, it must be offered first to the local market. It will be sad for the government to start exporting scrap metal and starve our local industry, which will create jobs. So this is something that we can do immediately without, we don't need to do anything very unique. It's just a simple commitment to developing our country and a simple commitment to support our industry. I really, really appreciate the resilience of this group we are in here. This association is demonstrating a lot of resilience. And we, as government, have a job and an obligation to support your resilience and make you fly and make this industry, because we have a lot to gain from your success. Ladies and gentlemen, I will spend the whole day talking about the good things that we are doing and the promises that we can say, but I'm so happy to come here and also would like to leave with a challenge. My challenge, I can see the challenge here is very simple. I really hope that for this year, this is the last time you invite the Honorable Minister to hire Austria. We would like to be invited to the industries, to the factories. We prepare for our visits. We have got our headsets, we've got our gear to see and feel the heat in those furnaces. That's what we want to see. And if you can get us into those factories, into those furnaces, not inside the furnace. So if you can arrange that at least once a month, there is a ministry official at one of your sites, so that we really keep in touch with your challenges, so that we do not get to the comfort of our air-conditioned offices and forget that actually we can only sit there if the industry is producing. With these remarks, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my singular honor and privilege to declare the 2025 State of Engineering Iron and Steel Industry officially launched. Thank you very much.
Already, and you may kindly come forward, so that you may kindly come forward and present that to the peers. for the cutting of the ribbon. Thank you very much. Right, are you happy with the angle, members of the 4th Estate? All right, fantastic. And here we go, the moment that we have all been waiting for. We heard the presentation, but now we're about to see the report officially launched and available for dissemination to industry parties. And yes, indeed. And here we go. A big congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Permanent Secretary, for cutting that ribbon, of course, emblematic of the launch of the report. And I'm pretty sure the PS would be glad to get a copy for, you may kindly. All right. All right. We've got the second ribbon. Quite interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. All right, let me move the platform. Oh, right. Fantastic. Both ribbons have been cut. Fantastic. Yes.
Standing next to the frame. Exactly.
All right. A request from members of the 4th Estate. The shots are very important. And to make sure that we are able to capture these moments in history very well. Okay, now let's just make the circle bigger, as it were. Right, and fantastic. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations, Makorokoto Amklope. The launch, of course, of the industry report as presented. Now, I do understand that we will witness the presentation of the booklets to all the attendees at this very event. Right, and at this point, we will witness the presentation of a token of appreciation to our guest of honor, the presentation of
the report. One of the reports.
All right, there is a request from the members of the 4th Estate that, of course, our PS gets to hold that copy so that they can get the best of shots for the circulation of the information to the media. Now you can bring that in as well. Maybe the chairman, yeah, perfect like that. Ms. Yamato, you may also get it inside the shot. Right. Perhaps the other members can also be holding copies. Any gun will shoot. Right. We are serious. We mean business. Let them do what they do and we do what we do. We mean business here. As a cheeky. Right. A big congratulations. We are glad, we are elated that the report has been launched. Months and months of research culminated and here compressed in that report, and we are grateful for that. Allow me, all right, at this point to call upon the team from EISAZ and NEC to present the token of appreciation to our guest of honor, the president relaying to the board chair so that the board chair may present to the guest of honor. Sir, thank you for coming through. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to be a part and parcel of what was taking place here. And with that token, that's what's being presented in the encapsulated in that gift. A big congratulations and thank you, sir. Allow me to detain you up front here for one more item, which would be a mini photo shoot for some of the key members here present, so that we're able to capture this moment in history. You see, in 2025, if there are no pictures, then it did not happen. So you would need the V11s to prove that indeed, of course, the PS was here. I'll now call upon a shot with, of course, the first one will be the PS with EISAZ President and NEC Chairman. Oops. All right. That was close. All right. Okay. Perfect. And here we go. The Kodak moment. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Right. Fantastic. Now I would like to call upon the VIP table to kindly come forward and join this very frame and shot right here. but kindly come forward, Sika. Please come forward and write a round of applause as they come through. I can see Fonera men on standby. Yes, we appreciate your presence, Fonera men, for the work that you are doing. Thank you. Our top table, thank you very much. You're welcome to take a seat. I'll ask the PS to still be upstanding. We will have the PS with the NEC and EISAZ board members and staff. The PS with the NEC and EISAZ board members and staff. Please, let's come forward quickly. Just check if they're any who are outside. Please make sure they're able to come through so that we are able to capture this moment. A round of applause, please, as they come forward.
Minister of Industry and Commerce, Minister Honorable Ngovisita Mangalisoni Ndlovu, well represented by the Permanent Secretary, Dr. Thomas Utete-Ushe, and thank you for gracing this engagement and championing our reindustrialization agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the National Employment Council of the Engineering, Iron and Steel Industry and the Engineering, Iron and Steel Association of Zimbabwe, thank you for the time, insight and commitment you have invested in today's engagement. We set out to listen, learn and agree on practical next steps, and that's what we've done. To our guests of honor and government partners, thank you for your leadership and active support. Your presence affirms the centrality of engineering and steel to reindustrialization and Vision 2030. To EISAZ and industry leaders, thank you for candid inputs and clear solutions. Your willingness to collaborate on quality, skills, standards and delivery sets the pace for the whole value chain. To our NEC board, led by the chairman, Advocate Kenan Farai Dube, thank you for firm governance, direction and accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, strong stewardship makes execution possible. To Engineer Lloyd Nyemba and panelists, thank you for the data, the hard truth and the practical recommendations you have given us. You've given us a solid baseline and a map we can follow. To labor and worker representatives, thank you for keeping us focused on safety, skills and productivity, which is the foundation of decent work and sustainable competitiveness. Let me also extend special appreciation to the teams that made today's work smoothly. The media for telling our story to the nation and keeping industry conversations in the public square. The PA and technical crew for clear sound and seamless delivery throughout the program. Our host at the hotel for professional hospitality and efficient logistics that kept the day on schedule. And the event director, Mr. Iben, for calm, pivotal coordination, disciplined timekeeping and smooth transition that held the entire program together. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, to the organizing team, Mr. Rizwa and your team, thank you for painstaking planning and coordination. Your quiet excellence is visible in every detail. Colleagues, drawing from the keynote address and the contributions across the program, we live with a shared action agenda, deepen skills, raise standards, strengthen safety, clear bottlenecks, and deliver orders on time and in full. If each of us improves just one metric, starting today, we will move the whole sector for the benefit of the nation. Travel safely, let's build it better together. I thank you.